Well, I have the honor of introducing Katherine Gehl. Katherine is a business leader, an entrepreneur, and a political innovation activist extraordinaire. She was the president and CEO of the $250 million company called Gehl Foods, a food manufacturing company in Wisconsin. A company that she sold in 2015 in order to devote herself to her passion, which is fixing the political system. So, God bless you. In 2016, she invited Harvard Business School economist Michael Porter to engage with her in research and co-authoring a study called Why Competition in the Politics Industry is Failing America, highlighting what has gone wrong with our political system and how we might get back on track. We're so pleased to have Katherine here tonight to share that analysis of that study with us. And I want you to know that after Katherine speaks and Jean Massey gives an update about ranked choice voting, there will be a question and answer period. So never fear, you'll get all your questions answered. Katherine Gehl.
And got to meet many of you in the room. So I have some new jokes, but mostly old ones. I'm counting on you to have forgotten. If you didn't think they were funny last year, hopefully you think they're funny this year. I'm going to start with a quick story about my daughter. Back in August of 2008, she was almost 3, and we were having a picnic outside, and she started yelling at the wind, as in, wind, stop ruining my picnic. And I said, oh, honey, we're not in charge of the wind. Remember who's in charge of the wind? And she looked at me and said, Barack Obama? I'm like, oh, so cute. I gotta get back to Sunday school. No, God is in charge of the wind. And now she said, then what is Barack Obama in charge of then? So you can see that we were in my family very all in for hope and change in 2008. And it was a wonderful experience being part of that campaign. At the same time, I can say candidly that I was left disappointed in the years following that election, not based on individuals, but based on the lack of results coming out of Washington, D.C. And since then, I have become ever increasingly concerned about the trajectory of the country. And basically what I see is our complete inability to solve real problems for real people that make a difference in their real lives. And I think for so many of us over time, the best that we felt we could do is essentially double down on our party, certain that it must be the other side that's the problem. Or perhaps, search for the next great change candidate. And yet, Obama was a change candidate, and after him, Trump was a change candidate. And we all know that definition, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and looking for different results. So I finally realized that I was looking for change in all the wrong places, just like I'd done for love. Hopefully this is going to work out better. So I realized we don't have so much a politician problem. We have lots of dedicated people wanting to make a difference. We don't really have a policy problem. We have a lot of great policies waiting to be enacted. We have a political system problem. So in 2010, I left partisan politics behind, and I am now all in for nonpartisan political information designed to get transformational change into the results that the political system delivers for people's real lives. And so that's why I'm so happy to be with you guys tonight. Basically, Jean Massey is a force, whatever Jean is doing, I want to be part of it. Along with the fabulous group of co-chairs and this group of 120 people come in on Monday night. I really appreciate it. Let's look at a graphic description of one of our biggest problems. Let's see how our technology goes. And, oh, here, right here. Okay. Here's a Venn diagram. There is, in our current political system today, virtually no intersection, no connection between politicians, elected officials acting in the public interest, and the likelihood that they will get reelected. Which basically means if our senators and congresspeople do their jobs the way we want and need them to, they're likely to lose those jobs. And that's fundamentally a crazy design. But the good news is that this design is also optional and we can change it. So let me explain. How many times have we all heard Washington is broken?
On the right.
Yes, now I have an assistant. Here we go. This Washington's broken, we say it all the time, but I have a good friend, former Congressman Mickey Edwards, and he originally explained that this represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. In fact, Washington isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. So how can our political system be so perfectly designed and yet deliver such dismal results? And the answer is that it turns out it's not designed for us. Actually, the system has been designed, fine-tuned and optimized over time by and for the benefit of two private gain-seeking organizations and their industry allies, what together we call the duopoly, the political industrial complex. And this political industrial complex is thriving. Our confusion has been that we've been assuming that the political system has been designed to work for us, the sitters, the voters, and the public interest. But it turns out that when we look under the proverbial hood, our political system really works very differently than what many of us have assumed. And we have a lot of examples, but tonight we have time just to talk about one. So if you recall back in 2009, when Joe Biden became vice president, his Senate seat was then open in the state of Delaware. And I'm told that everybody in the state knew who was going to be the next senator from the state of Delaware, and that was Mike Castle. Multiple-term congressperson, multiple-term governor, and the most popular politician in the state. So Mike Castle ran his Republican primary, and he lost. Now this was completely shocking, but not theoretically insurmountable, because after all, it's just the primary. Mike Castle could turn around and put himself on the general election ballot in November as an independent, and he would have won, because he was so unbelievably popular. And yet, none of us has ever heard of a Senator Mike Castle. He had a slight problem. Delaware has a law called the sore loser law. And what that says is that if you run in your party's primary, Democrat or Republican, and you lose, you are not permitted to have your name on the general election ballot in November. Fitness, popularity, experience, it's all immaterial. So the question is, how many states have a law like Delaware's, this crazy undemocratic law? And the answer is 44. And we're sitting in one tonight. Now, there are a few other things that we need to understand about partisan primaries. They might be publicly funded, but think about it for a moment. They're really a selection process for the standard bearer of a private gain-seeking organization. And primaries are the reason why so many people show up at the general election and might think, I really don't love these choices that I have, because most elections are really decided in the primary, especially in gerrymandered districts. And voters who turn out for partisan primaries often tend to be further to the right or the left than voters as a whole generally are. Therefore, to make it through the primary, then the candidates have to go further to the right or the left than the electorate. Many of us are familiar with that problem, but there's something even bigger going on, which is to say that the influence of the partisan primary goes far beyond the primary itself and who gets elected, but it extends to pervert actual governance. extends to the legislative process. So I want you to imagine yourself for a moment as a politician in Washington, D.C., and you have an opportunity to vote yes on a bipartisan compromise piece of legislation on perhaps one of our biggest national problems. What are the questions that you would want to ask yourself? Perhaps, is this a good idea? Is this the right policy for the country? Is this what the majority of my constituents want? But it's actually none of those. The question that you have to ask is, am I going to make it back through my partisan primary if I vote for this? And if the answer to that question is no, and on all the tough, big issues it virtually always is, then the answer to those other important questions are virtually wholly irrelevant, because the rational incentive to get reelected dictates that you vote no. Having said that, if you decide nonetheless to vote yes anyway, and the leadership of your party doesn't want you to do that, you'll be threatened with a primary. Primary, long ago, ceased to be just a noun. It's now an action verb, as in we're going to primary you. And what that means is we're going to want someone further to your left if you're a Democrat, further to your right if you're a Republican. Never has it meant that we're going to run a more compromise, consensus-oriented candidate to the middle. And partisan primaries effectively force our elected officials right and left, and this makes it virtually impossible to work together to actually get anything done. As I often say, politics really doesn't work quite the way that little song from Schoolhouse Rock told me that it did many years ago. Now, to understand how and why the political competition diverges sharply from the public interest, we use what's called the 5 forces framework. My co-author, Michael Porter, developed it decades ago to understand competition in for-profit industries. And in 2013, while I was using it to do the strategy for my food manufacturing company in neighboring Wisconsin, I ran a parallel process in my mind using 5 forces to understand what I have now come to call the politics industry. And this analysis is super complex, it's super long, but I hope you'll read about it in our report or our new book coming out in May of 2020. This is my advertisement. My publisher pays me a little extra to do that. And for today, I'm just going to make 3 points from it because I want to spend time on the solutions. So first, the politics industry is a duopoly. So there's only 2 competitors. This has a profound impact on how these parties, this duopoly and their industry allies, choose to compete. Second, customer power in the politics industry is misplaced. So the most important customers of the duopoly are not citizens or the public interest. Savvy businesses always prioritize their most profitable customers. And in this case, the political duopoly does the same. So it chooses to prioritize those customers that most advance its interest. And those customers are special interest donors and partisan primary voters. Recent research supports with big data these conclusions. In 2014, there was a research team at Princeton and Northwestern University, and they analyzed public policy action on 1,179 issues. And here's their finding, and I'll quote it for you. When the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are accounted for, the preferences of the average American appear to have a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. That is always shocking to me every time I say that in this democracy, the United States of America. Third and finally, again, back to this analysis, is that the barriers to entry in this industry of politics are really high. That means it's super hard for new competition to come into the industry. In any other industry, so a food industry, drink industry, an automobile industry, where you have this much customer dissatisfaction, such as 90% of people not approving of Congress, and yet you have only 2 players, some entrepreneur would see it as a fabulous business opportunity and they'd enter the market to provide a new product, new service, to deliver what customers want, but that doesn't happen in politics. Because the parties work together in one particular way, which is to rig the rules of the game to protect themselves jointly from new competition. They erect, as I'm calling it, the huge barriers to entry, like the sore loser laws that we heard about earlier. And I'm going to give you just another example. So the duopoly creates together the fundraising limits. And here's the current state of them. Any of you, if you'd so like to, can donate $847,500 tonight. See me if you'd like, because I have another thing I want you to donate to, but to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or you could donate to both. But if you'd like to support an independent candidate, a new competitor, you're limited to $5,400 every 2 years. Which makes it very hard for the new competition to get the startup capital that they need. That is a factor of 313 times difference in the funding available. So since it's virtually impossible for new competition to enter the market, it comes as no surprise that while we're in a country that has 6,000 breweries and 3,000 wineries, when it comes to our politics, we can choose between door number A or door number B. And it turns out that many of us don't love the choices behind either one of those doors. And generally we tend to be much more satisfied with the choices we have from the beer and wine industry than this, the most important of industries. It probably contributes to the growth of those other industries. As is always the case in life, the rules of the game affect the way the game is played. And the rules of the game, the net result of the rules of the game in politics is unhealthy competition. Unhealthy competition in elections, and there's also unhealthy competition in the way that we compete to pass legislation in Washington, D.C., which we don't have time to go into tonight. But the result of unhealthy competition in any industry is always that the customers of that industry are not well served. Put another way, politics isn't broken, it's fixed. And my daughter, the one who is 3 but still has to deal with all this political stuff, has a better joke. She says her favorite is, if con is the opposite of pro, then isn't Congress the opposite of progress? So this looks like a promising antitrust case. But you won't be surprised to know that the people who make up the rules of the game on antitrust, the politicians, have made it so that conveniently antitrust regulation does not apply in the politics industry. And troublingly, there's simply no accountability for any of this. And that's because there's no accountability because the customer, us, only has 2 choices. So no matter how, the only thing that either party has to do to win is to convince the average voter to stay home or to choose that party because at least that party says, therefore, what that voter believes. But what neither side has to do in this duopoly is actually produce results. Because no matter how disappointed you are with your side's elected officials and what's happening in government, you still likely prefer what your side says they're representing than what the one other choice says they're for. Therefore, instead of results in the public interest, we get gridlock and dysfunctional drama. And we're really quite used to it. We actually think it's normal. We think it's the state of things. In fact, sometimes we're just looking for a little bit less gridlock and a little bit less drama. We almost don't believe that we have the right anymore to expect great things out of our government. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be like this, and political innovation can save us. So I'm going to summarize the theory of change from our work. So again, in any game, board games, sports games, serious games like politics, the rules of the game affect the way the game is played. And you can change the rules of the game in any human endeavor, and you'll get different behavior, and you'll alter the outcomes. You can change the rules of the game in politics and get different behavior, because most of the rules aren't in the Constitution. Remember, it fits in the pocket. Okay, that's why we call it the pocket Constitution. So the rules that are governing behavior are ones that we have made up, that we've chosen, and therefore we could choose differently. As such, we have the power to change what's happening. And today I want to talk about the most powerful innovation that's available to us and that has brought so many of you here tonight. But first, I will move back to cover the two critical structural problems in our elections. So first, the partisan primaries, which I already talked about. Here's how I want you to think about it. Think about the partisan primary as creating a super small eye of the needle through which no problem-solving elected official can pass. Sort of like it's easier for the rich man to go to heaven than for a politician on one side to vote yes on immigration something, and a politician on another side to vote yes on gun control something, and they'll never get through that eye of the needle. The second problem that we have, which we haven't talked about yet and we never think about, is plurality voting. So in the US, elections can be won by having the most votes, but not necessarily a true majority. So for example, you could have a three-way race, and a candidate could win with 34% of the vote, with the other two candidates splitting the rest, which means, yes, the 34% person won, but 66% of the voters preferred someone else. So we never think about this, because it just seems normal. But it turns out that plurality voting is an enormous barrier to new competition, and never feeling threatened by the possibility of new competition, as we just discussed, is the single greatest reason that elected officials aren't incented to deliver results. And that's because plurality voting creates what we call the spoiler argument, and you'll recognize this. Sometimes we don't vote for the candidate we really want out of fear that our vote will inadvertently help elect the candidate that we want, that we like the least. So for example, go back to 2016, in the presidential, you're not supposed to vote for Jill Stein because you'll take votes away from Hillary, spoil the election for her, and inadvertently help elect Donald Trump. But at the same time, you're not supposed to vote for Gary Johnson, a libertarian, because you'll take votes away from Trump and spoil the election for him and inadvertently help elect Hillary. So the spoiler argument and its companion, the wasted vote argument, are wielded against all potential competition. And these arguments are a key reason why we don't have the healthy competition that we really need. They're a key reason why most potential competition doesn't even make it to the starting line. So Jill Stein and Gary Johnson made it to the starting line, but most don't. So for example, we saw this past year, former CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, considered an independent run for president. And he was vehemently attacked by Democrats who were deeply concerned that he would spoil the election for the future Democratic nominee. And therefore, he's not a candidate anymore. Now, whether or not any of us think that Howard Schultz would have made the best president, it's very telling that politics is the only industry where we, the customer, are regularly told that less competition is going to be better for us. And no matter whether we're enthusiastic Trump Republicans or enthusiastic Warren Democrats, we know that line about less competition simply is not true. So the election innovation that we propose tonight, called Top 5 RC solves both these problems, solves the eye of the needle and solves the plurality voting problem. And it's going to fundamentally change what politicians are incented to do and our ability to hold them accountable for delivering those results. So with Top 5 RCV, we changed two things, one in the primary election and one in the general election. First, we're going to eliminate partisan primaries. So you're not going to have the Democrat primary and the Republican primary. We'll have one open, nonpartisan primary. And here's how that works. You show up, and everybody who's running, Democrats, Republicans, Greens, Libertarians, Independents, are all on the same ballot. And you choose your favorite. Votes, the polls close, votes are counted. The top 5 finishers out of that primary automatically advance to the general election. Then, the top 5 primary eliminates, therefore, that eye of the needle problem, and thus allows legislators significantly more freedom to develop solutions in the public interest and still retain an ability to get reelected. So now the second thing we do, which is what so many here have been working on for many years, is we implement ranked choice voting in the general election. So I know a lot of you know what it is, and thank you for being one of the leaders in the country on this, but for those who are here and aren't familiar with ranked choice voting, I want to explain it. So now let's assume that we're in the general election, and the top 5 finishers from the primary are on the ballot. So now when I go to vote, I pick my favorite just like always. But then if I would like, I also say, this is my second choice, my third choice, my fourth choice, my last choice. I'm going to show you a ballot, sample ballot in the ranked choice election. So here it is, I've got 5, and Abigail Adams is my first choice, because I think we'd be in a different place today. Okay, but I like the musical, so Alexander Hamilton could be number 2 for me, and George is 3, and Thomas is 4, and John Adams, Abigail's husband, is 5. Now, the polls close, and all the first place votes are counted. If, after counting all the first place votes, one of these candidates has a true majority over 50%, well, the election's over. That candidate is the winner. However, if out of the 5, no one has more than 50%, then the candidate who came in last is automatically eliminated from the race, and voters who had selected that candidate, who's now out, so they can't be voted for anymore, now have their second choice counted instead. We run the results, we run the totals again, and if someone has a true majority, they win. If not, we eliminate the last candidate, and we continue that process until we elect a true majority winner. It's basically a series of runoffs, but instead of having to keep coming back for another election, you cast all your votes at once. Ranked choice voting eliminates both the spoiler and the wasted vote argument and ensures that we always elect the candidate with the greatest appeal to the most number of voters. And these are not crazy new ideas, by the way. So all the way back in 2002, Alaska had a referendum to put ranked choice voting in their state. And there was a very famous politician who at the time reported a robocall in support of ranked choice voting, and we'll listen to that now.
Hello, this is Senator John McCain. I'm calling to urge your support for ballot measure 1 on August 27th. As a presidential candidate and as a senator, I've worked hard to open up the political process for all Americans. Ballot measure 1 will adopt a fairer voting method. It will lead to good government because Alaska will elect leaders who have the support of a majority of voters. Please vote yes on measure 1 on August 27th.
For those of you who couldn't hear, that was the voice of John McCain supporting ranked choice voting in 2002 in an Alaska referendum. At the same time in 2002, I lived in Illinois, and we had Senate Bill 1789. And this proposed ranked choice voting for all statewide primaries, congressional and state. The sponsor, then State Senator Barack Obama. We have John McCain, Barack Obama, 2 talented and devoted public servants who absolutely knew how the game is played. They were ahead of their time on this political innovation. But tonight, as evidenced by this room and the movement we have around the country, and the work of people like Jean Massey over this time, our time is coming. Together, these reforms, top 5 primaries, and ranked choice voting general elections will powerfully alter incentives. So I'd like you for a moment to reimagine Congress post-elections reform. So now, a member of Congress, perhaps the exact same person we talked about at the beginning, has an opportunity to vote yes on a bipartisan compromise bill to solve real problems. They can now vote yes if it's in the public interest. They can say to themselves, well, under the old system, I never would have gotten back from my primary if I voted for this. But I think that under the new system, I can for sure be in the top 5. I'm the incumbent, I'm super well known, I'm doing a good job. I'll be in the top 5. And then in the general election with a combination of first and second place and third place votes, I will be able to craft a win. Under this system of voting, elected officials now owe their election to a broader group of voters. In fact, they owe their election to the opinions of all the constituents in their district, and they're incented now to be responsive to that entire district, rather than to a narrow swath of partisan primary voters, donors, and special interests. And the existing incentives for scorched earth campaigning or scorched earth committee hearings are certainly reduced, but most importantly, the barriers to entry for new competition are much lower, which leads to healthy competition to serve the public interest. So let's go back quickly to our Venn diagram. So remember this one. In the current system, there's no intersection between doing what we need done in the public interest and the likelihood of getting reelected. But if we implement top 5 RCV, we create that intersection. Now, the actors in the politics industry are incented to do what we as citizens need them to do, and that is the power of political innovation. So what's next? Well, we need to pass this legislation around the country. As many of you know, the US Constitution delegates virtually everything about elections, even about federal elections, to the states to make the rules. So each state needs to change these rules individually through either legislation or citizens' initiatives. Now that's, of course, the macro what's next. But what's next for us as individuals, community leaders, and activists, well, we've got to get engaged. So first, we have to join. So here, it's fabulous. You have this campaign run by the host tonight, led by Jean Massey, who will speak after me, this campaign for Fair Vote Minnesota for ranked choice voting. You'll want to stay involved absolutely as much as possible, and we'll have a chance to talk about that. It really is an exciting time across the country because now other states are also getting in on this action. I come from your neighboring state of Wisconsin, and our executive director, Sarah Eskridge, is here, and so she is working on these innovations in our state at the same time. We also have exciting campaigns in Alaska and California, and I just came from Wyoming today, and last night I believe we put together the core nucleus of a nascent campaign for Wyoming. Democracy. I'm also thinking, I think I said this last summer, that we could maybe have like a little competition between Minnesota and Wisconsin to see who would get there first. Dozens of states across the country have won gateway reforms, such as open primaries, top 2 primaries, and gerrymandering reform. And about 18 months ago, the state of Maine became the first state in the country to pass ranked choice voting. At the time, I actually woke my daughter up after midnight at her request because she knew, because I told her, that this was the most important election of her lifetime to date. So the second thing we have to do is we have to fund these efforts to get them over the finish line. This stuff does take money. And everybody asks what it's going to take, and it's a super important question. So I want to let you know that I think that political philanthropy, what a friend of mine, David Crane, coined as a special interest for the general interest, is the most powerful philanthropy available today, in part because the dollars aren't actually that prohibitive. So I want to scale it for you. So many of you have heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Giving Pledge, where billionaires will pledge to give away half their money before they die. Well, that giving pledge has already collected commitments in excess of $300 billion. All Americans annually give $400 billion to philanthropy. But the cost to deliver top 5 ranked choice voting per state, well, it's anywhere from $5 million in a smaller legislative state to perhaps $25 million in a large referendum state like California. So if we take an aggressive average of $15 billion across 20 states, then that gives us $300 million, not billion, $300 million. And $300 million is a lot. But guess what? It's less than 5% of the billions that were spent in the 2016 federal elections. And yet $300 million for top 5 RCV is far more likely to sustainably impact the trajectory of the country and the effectiveness of $4 trillion of government spending than any of those other investments. So if you're interested in becoming a political innovation philanthropist, here's Jean Massey. So finally, you have to evangelize. So think about it this way. If you had a friend or a family member that was confronted with a really difficult problem and you became aware of a solution to their problem, you really would stop at nothing to get it to them. And our democracy demands the same passion. So in advance of the holidays, I'm here to let you know that it is time to talk politics again at all of your gatherings, family, maybe some cocktail party, maybe even at work. Personally, I have a 100% success rate with every airplane seat made in the past year. I grade myself now. So if I can open up the computer and be showing a Venn diagram before the plane takes off, that's an A. The last guy said to me, "Oh yeah, but I have a better idea. It's called the guillotine." But he didn't have a Venn diagram, so I sort of won in the end. I hope that many of you are going to be all in because Minnesota is a key state for our movement nationally. Historically, the American political system was a critical foundation of the United States' success, and today it really does stand in the way of virtually every important issue that we need to address. Yet we have every reason to be optimistic, perhaps even profoundly optimistic, because the reasons for our dysfunction are actually not a mystery. And it turns out that we have far more power over those reasons than really any of us have known. This country was founded on the greatest political innovation of modern times. And political innovation is once again the key to our future. So I want to close with an invitation to action. Thomas Jefferson is said to have said, "We don't have American government by the majority, we have government by the majority who participate." And historically, for me, I thought that meant that I needed to participate by voting, or maybe, by working for, a candidate here and there. But it turns out what it means is that we also have to participate in the design of the rules of this most important game. So imagine if we do that. Imagine our political system restored to order. Imagine our political system where our elected representatives tackle our greatest challenges, paving the way for a bigger and brighter future than we've really been able to dream of in recent years. Imagine our democracy reinvigorated once again, a beacon to the world. Reclaiming the promise of our republic, this great American experiment, is the challenge of our times. And I believe that together we can deliver this for us and for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you so much.